So it's great to be here, and really thrilled for the invitation and the opportunity to talk to the arts education community. Thanks to our civic leaders, thanks to the foundations and funders who support really important work. I did want to share a couple of things today that maybe will help kind of set some questions or overarching thoughts that perhaps can live through the day, and I look forward to hearing people's reflections after going through this great experience. So most people know, some people don't. I don't know that, my roots are in the arts. I grew up in the theater. I did my first show when I was 8, and went on to perform in over 200 plays and sort of direct and produced just as many over the course of my career. And then that's what actually made me start working with young people initially, was using theater as a cross-cultural tool, particularly for young people who had really gotten into trouble. And when I was teaching, I started a nonprofit called Lullabies Productions, where we produced and directed shows based on the writings of the journals of our kids in the district, and how they were, the effects of violence on their daily lives and how they were experiencing it. So it was a project that involved writing and reflecting and journaling, but also creating sets and dance teams and acting and the whole enchilada. When my first year teaching, I won a Sallie Mae First Year Teacher of the Year award, and they required me to identify a teacher who had most influenced my teaching style. And I was like, well, can I talk about my family at the Santa Monica Playhouse, the directors there, the theater instructors? They're like, no, you have to have a classroom teacher. And I was like, oh God, I don't have one. I don't have one. I'm a certified Montessori teacher, spent lots of time in traditional public schools, but I literally could not identify, sort of an influential teacher outside of the scope of all the work I'd done in the theater. So I feel like, I joke that I want to write a book, Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in the Theater, because, those are skills that you carry with you for your entire life. It's, anyone who's grown up in the theater knows the rules, right? We all have the rituals. It's like, always raise your hand to go first, right? Speak your truth, no one else's. Hear others' truths, be open to hearing others' truths. Take feedback, and all you're allowed to do, anyone know this rule, right? After a scene, you sit there, you listen to the audience just rip into you, and all you're allowed to do is say, thank you for your feedback. Which comes very handy in this job, okay? Thank you for your feedback. Because the theory is you're not allowed to chase after the audience after they leave and say, but you were supposed to think this about my character or that about my character, right? It is what it is. They felt how they felt. They saw what they saw. Never be afraid to take a risk. The greatest risk is actually not getting on stage. Fake it till you make it. I mean, these are all, if you don't know your lines, act like you do. These are like awesome life skills, right? So, and they really are. So I think on a daily basis about the muscle memory that I developed, as an artist, but as a person, having grown up in the arts and then in arts education, and how profound of an impact it had on me. And I think about, Eleazar Gonzalez, my 6th grade student, who had literally shoved a teacher's desk out the 3rd floor window of our school, which bought him a year-long suspension, landing him in my class. I couldn't actually quite figure out how he actually did it. My first question was, how could you fit that thing out the window, and how did you get it over to the window? This sounds very premeditated, this is not an act of rage. But I think about Eleazar, and who is a Facebook friend of mine now, and casting him as the lead in one of our shows, and just what that experience did for him as a person, as a student, and how I was able to connect with him outside of the scope of sort of traditional education in ways that were complementary but different, right? I was his teacher and I was his director, and those were different things, and I was able to help him grow in different ways depending on which hat I was wearing that day. So very dedicated to arts education and figuring out how to help nationally, but obviously most importantly, locally, how we actually raise our game, if you will, in 2 very important ways. One is in arts education to be for art's sake, for for being a well-rounded individual, to teach social emotional skills and creative skills like the ones I just said, right? So that's one way. And also as a way to support and accelerate academic excellence. Sort of the curricular infused in more of a kind of academic excellence way. Those goals are complementary and different, right? There's yet a third set of things around. Some folks have the skill set to also help teachers and administrators use artistic training, if you will, or arts and education to be more effective in general, okay? So those are sort of the buckets. There's, how to help young people embrace art to become well-rounded citizens. There's how to use art to drive higher levels of academic achievement. And then there's how to use art to sort of raise the skill of adults, because sometimes there's nothing more powerful than getting teachers to understand the principles of improv and how that may actually make them more exciting in the classroom. So those are three kind of areas that I think about a lot. And we are poised to kind of dive in this year in a much deeper way with the arts community about how do we do that, bigger, better, faster. Linwood's heard me say this before, but it's not, there's a thing in the arts education community that happens sometimes, and I say it with all love because I'm a we, right? I am an arts educator by heart, by training, where all arts education is great, right? And we're not allowed to talk about quality and results and, measures of success, and somehow that's not allowed to enter the conversation, or sometimes it can be discouraged. And what I'm excited about in Newark is that doesn't seem to be the case. The roundtable came together in large part to kind of pool promising practices, to talk about quality, to think about synergies so we don't have 1,000 flowers blooming with some being awesome and some not. This is the explicit goal and mission of the roundtable. For me, that is unbelievably exciting, and we are, I think, finally after I literally just passed my 1-year anniversary, poised to kind of really dig in and start thinking about how we can actually do more work in that endeavor, right? So one thing I did want to share, because I know it was, I've heard lots of questions and concerns about, our process of making decisions regarding partnerships and how we monitor them, and the new process for, applying to be a partner of NPS. And I wanted to say a few words about that, if it's okay, just because while I know this wasn't my charge this morning, I figured everyone's in one room. You often don't get these chances. Something that we are very committed to across the board in arts and everything is really changing the way in which we put out our RFQs, what are they called here? RFPs, RFQs, QRS, TUV, PQS. We have a new process which is called a pre-qualification system that allows partners of all sorts, not just arts, but professional development providers in all disciplines, to become pre-qualified to be a partner of Newark Public Schools. This is a great thing in that I think we've been much more explicit about what the requirements are. But it also was a challenging thing this year because it opened and closed in an absurd amount of time, and lots of people felt like they were left out of the process. So what I want to make sure everyone knows is there will be another process. Part of the short window this time was to respond to a very specific need we had that was not about arts per se, it was about something else where we needed to open and close it quickly. There will be another process that will have a 45-day window, so look out for that. So there'll be, sort of 2 weeks that will allow you to decide, respond, 2 weeks of analysis and additional digging, and then 2 weeks where our team will, score the proposals and respond to the teams that apply. So it'll be 45 days, not 24 hours or 48 hours, whatever it was. So the ship has not sailed. We want you all to sort of look out for that and think about it. And we hope that we have, deep partnerships with many of the folks in this room moving forward. So I wanted to let you know that. The other thing I wanted to let you know is, what's on my mind about those things. and give you some thoughts. There's all sorts of legal stuff, so this is just Cami talking as a person and sharing with you what matters to me as the superintendent and what I think one should really think about when making these proposals. The first is, think about the buckets I laid out. Art for well-rounded and for art's sake, right? Art as accelerant of curricula, and art to train adults, basically, teachers or principals. The first thing is, look in the mirror. Not everyone is qualified to do all three of those things, right? They're just not, okay? Art for art's sake and for well-rounded individuals, that is important. It's really important. Theater, great music, great visual art is critical. And there are some organizations that are uniquely suited to teach that, during school and after school in a very, very high quality way. That's a great skill, okay? It is a related but different skill to convince me and our team that you understand the new National Common Core standards that everyone in the country is adopting, and that you have a high level of skill in mapping what you do to the specifics of this unbelievably new, rigorous, tough curricula, and that your organization has the skill set and expertise to infuse art in very specific ways to help young people internalize and master those standards, okay? That's a different skill. They can go together, but they don't always go together. And that one we have a very high bar for, because how many people are familiar with the new National Common Core standards? So anyone in this room, I won't put people on blast, but I was about to say, who thinks they're similar to what we have right now? And anyone who raised their hand, I'd be like, not even close, okay? If you have not had an opportunity, and in fact, this is something we could help with, we've been working with Student Achievement Partners, the authors of the National Common Core, on experiential learning around what does Common Core teaching look like. Let me tell you what happens whenever you go through one of those. And I've done it about 20, 25 times now, where I've actually engaged in like a sample Common Core type lesson. Anyone who has a learning orientation, in other words, anyone with an open mind, leaves and says, oh, holy cow. We need to be teaching not slightly, but radically differently than we are now. Radically differently. So one thing is, I'd be happy to see if we can organize something for this group to have that experience, because I think it's important. It's like you don't see it till you see it, right? We recently, for example, had a session with our principals where we looked at what the publishers so take Basel Readers as an example, right, ELA. We looked at a piece of ELA writing in one of our Basel Readers, and we actually worked with a team of teachers and Student Achievement Partners to create a model Common Core unit using that piece in the Basel Reader, okay? And then we looked at what the publisher recommended, like how it would be taught. Like, they were as different as night and day. The model Common Core unit looked nothing. In fact, it was pretty much do the opposite of what the publisher is asking you to do. So we're happy to help this community understand the Common Core better, to share some of those model units, to try to see if we can help identify some of the folks we know who are awesome at it. But that second piece, arts educators, science educators, NPS, policymakers, the best teachers I know, we are all going to be challenged to raise our game around alignment and teaching that the Common Core requires. It's also very exciting, because it's saying fewer, clearer, higher. Fewer standards, clearer standards, higher rigor. As an educator, someone who's been in this over 20 years, this is just, you can't see my gray because of my natural blonde hair. But there's lots of it now. This is an exciting innovation. Like, I'm actually genuinely very excited about it, because I can sort of see how it's going to push us to reach more young people and to think about mastery of critical thinking in ways that our current standards just don't. And for me, that's really exciting. So anyway, back to my framework, right? So now I'm on curriculum. Internalize the Common Core, really understand what those shifts require. That's a different skill set, right, than, great art. The third pillar, training adults. This is one where I am likely to be extremely selective. So I'm just, full disclosure. My own theory of change and the theory of change that I have seen work across the country is that every single place you see high achievement, you see an awesome principal. Awesome. I've never been to an awesome school and not seen an awesome principal. Okay? Never. I've never been to a school that's getting true breakthrough results. And by that, I mean working with largely students who are living below the poverty level and getting incredibly high levels of proficiency without awesome teachers. They go hand in hand. So getting the right folks, people, the principal, their team, the teachers, and giving them the right professional development, for me, is everything. And so Dick Elmore writes a lot about school reform, and he says you have to figure out what you hold tight. In other words, what's like really tightly controlled so you're really clear about quality, and what's loose, where you experiment. So professional development for principals and teachers, tight. Tight, 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 which means how we train them is critical. So that's yet another skill and a place where we'll have an extremely high bar, and there we probably will have, just full disclosure, fewer partners rather than more, because right now what we're doing as a system, and this is not anyone in this room's doing, it's ours. A little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, a dash of garlic, but we don't have, the meal may just be gross. Like, if we're not actually thinking about professional development as being aligned, consistent, it's like one-shot wonders here and there and there. That's not going to get it done. So on the adult piece, we're likely to get pretty narrow. We're also, just for folks to know, working on a new teacher evaluation framework that is more aligned to the Common Core. Because our current framework, Charlotte Danielson, anyone familiar with, is fine. But it's almost like we had the Common Core standards come out, right? And we're all running around trying to align our teacher eval framework to the Common Core standards. And there was a moment where I was sitting with 15 other superintendents, some of the most instructionally minded superintendents I know in the country, and we were at a retreat. And we had one session on teacher evaluation where we were all sharing our rubrics, best practices, how do we actually do this better? And then we had one session on the Common Core. And then lunch came, and I was like, I'm always that person. I was like, how come those were separate sessions? Like, is anyone else uncomfortable? Because I'm sort of feeling like going into lunch after having had this Common Core experience, can we go back to the morning session? Because I have some different things to say now, right? Like, we have to better align the how and the what of teaching. If our frameworks represent yesterday's standards, then teachers are going to feel like you're asking me to teach X, but you're evaluating me with Y. So we've been working with, again, the people who wrote the Common Core, a couple of other cities, the New Teacher Project, best-in-class thinkers all over the country to create a new framework. And when that is ready, that will be a really good tool for people in this room who think that their group has the skill to train teachers to think about those are the competencies that we are saying we believe every teacher should possess to be not just a great teacher, but a great teacher who is putting their children on the pathway to master Common Core, right? Those are related and different topics. So I say all that to say, step back and think about capacity of, and also think about depth versus breadth, right? I mean, God bless funders, but sometimes they're like, more is more. 10 is awesome. 5 is not so awesome. Sometimes, going narrower and deeper is a good thing, right? Scale is not always your friend. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, right? So first, step back and think about my 3 buckets and just be honest with yourself about the extent to which your organization is suited to do 1 or 3. Don't try to do all 3 if you really aren't suited to do that. 2, think about, synergies and partnerships with other organizations, not for the sake of it, but sometimes there's strength in, pairing up. And 3, just be aware that on the curriculum side and on the training side, Newark and the country are engaged in a massive shift. Massive. So I am hopeful. Let us work together, which might be a little hard and tough, to make sure the arts education community isn't left behind in that transition. There's no reason for that to happen, but that's going to require courage. it's not going to be business as usual. It's going to require self-reflection. It's going to require knowledge of the Common Core. It's going to require understanding our leadership and our teacher frameworks in a way that maybe hasn't happened before. And it's not going to happen overnight. But it's big. If I have one message for you, it's big and it's exciting. But right now, I don't see enough conversation happening among the arts education community. And again, that's in part because we don't bridge these two conversations. But it is possible nationally, just like it is in Newark, for the arts education community to be left behind in that transition. I don't think that would be a good thing. I would regard that as tremendous failure based on my own personal experiences and passion. But I also think that tremendous failure would be accepting the status quo. There's some work to be done here, and we're excited to do it together. So sorry if that was TMI or more than I was supposed to say, but I wanted to let you all know that you will be seeing some shifts, and we're not going to be perfect, and we're apologetic about the blip on if it sent a message on the RF, whatever it's called, Q thing. That's not what we meant to, right? And so, and we do want to work with you, but it is going to require some time and shifts and hard work. So I hope we sit here 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and we become a model of embracing academic excellence and standards, with, alongside, and because of arts education, not separate from or, around or behind or any of those other adjectives or whatever those are, prepositions, I guess. Where's the English teachers in the room? So anyway, with that, I wish you an awesome conference, and I really deeply thank you all for the opportunity to address you this morning. So have a great day.
Cami, thank you. Sure. Yeah.